The red rain came in torrents upon the unsuspecting masses. It drenched the city, its first victim. It saturated the streets, the buildings, and choked out the air. It left people wondering. At first, they stayed in their houses, too confused to do anything, but as time waned, so did their caution. Some began to think of the rain as nothing more than a natural phenomenon. Others assigned God was purging the earth. However, none of them knew the truth. It wasn't natural, and it wasn't God's wrath. No, it was something far more horrible and cruel than any god. That was the ignorant masses' first mistake. The second was when they finally decided it was safe to step out into that forbidden, bloody, crimson-red rain. He was standing under the pale yellowish light of a lamppost that was slightly rusted with age. The sky was black, not a star to be seen. Not ever since the sky had been blotted out, that is. It seemed it had been dipped into the blackest pitch, like ink spilling across a page. They had all been covered, though not erased. The man was sure of that. The man checked to find that he still had his umbrella. It was raining that very moment, but he had to make sure he had it just in case. Suddenly, he got the feeling of being watched. He looked to see a shadowy figure, but by the time he blinked, it had disappeared. A figment of his imagination? Maybe. But he wasn't too keen on disappearing acts, either. As the man took a step out of the lampost's faded light, thunder ominously roared in the distance, a heart-stopping warning. Like a lion and its prey, it caused the man to pause. Suddenly, he started to pick up his pace to a light jog. His foot hit a puddle as he seemingly grew unnerved, and by effect a carelessness, caused out of fear, began to trickle into his spine from his brain, like condensation clinging to a window in the chilly morning. He tripped, all too wary of the puddle, trying to escape the grasp it seemed to have on him. Falling into a nearby chain-link fence, he hastily checked his boot for any kind of indication of red water. His flashlight went on, and the water on his boot was just a regular puddle for now. The man breathed a sigh of relief and went on his way, eventually coming upon a payphone. He once again turned his LED flashlight on so he could illuminate his surroundings better. Then he gave up the required amount of change to use the coin-operated payphone. He punched in the code for the message. A message meant for him and only him. Suddenly, a pre-recorded voice came through the small speaker. It was a silky, luscious voice you would expect to hear, coming from the sexy, mature type of woman, sometimes found in an old film or a lucky visit to a bar that starred one of them as a singer. Or even one of those freshly made widows that visit a detective, eager to solve a case involving the death of their husband. The voice told the man to go to an address, and to bring with him the CD-ROM located inside the phone box. Once the message was over, the man took a screwdriver out of the pocket of his trench coat, and removed all the rusty screws from the phone box. Then he carefully removed the metal casing. At that moment, a lightning strike flashed close by. Its brightness showed the contents of the phone box case. It was empty. Suddenly, the man was suspicious about who had removed the CD-ROM, but had been careful enough to replace the screws, making it appear to an outsider that it was never opened in the first place. However, the likelihood of someone else even being in this place at all was very slim. A stranger to this chain of events wouldn't bat an eye at a broken phone box, let alone even if they happened upon such a desolate place. He left the phone booth and turned slowly in a full circle. Lighting flashed again to illuminate the bench just behind him. He whipped his body around just in time for another thunderstrike. An old man, who looked to be homeless by the judgment of his ragged clothes and his choice of residence at that time of night, sat on a bench, staring straight ahead. His hands rested unseen in the abyssal pockets of his scruffy brown coat. The man checked his pulse to find that the old man was dead. Then he checked his pockets. The thought of the ethically questionable act of looting a dead body hadn't even crossed his mind. He finished searching, finding enough money for a single phone call, but no CD. A thunderous roar shook the area, and another bright strike of lightning occurred, as if it were an act of providence, a signal from God. But for what, the man couldn't figure out a reason. He looked to the sky with an entirely unreadable expression and set off for the address that the message had offered him, accepting the offering as if it were a lamb for sacrifice. He didn't know what to hope for, what to even expect, but the house he found had largely been unchanged since the rain had first appeared. The outside had been somewhat stained with crimson, due to the endless rainstorms that pounded its exterior with the ferocity of a maimed animal. However, when the man went inside, he saw that it was untouched, with a coating of dust that had settled from years of absence of life. The man looked through each room slowly, not touching it, as if he wanted to leave it in the past, when everything was perfect, before the crimson rains doused everything in their bloody revelry. Slowly, he walked down the hall to the last door the house had to offer. Phantom images flashed into his mind of a child sneaking to the same door, a child reaching for the door, and the child's father snatching him before he could open it, telling him not to ever go into his study. Then the father's face was obscured and blurred to the man, no longer identifiable. The man could not say who he was. He took a deep breath after steadying himself on one of the solid walls, and then he opened the door. Lighting once again lit up the surroundings, this time, however, bathed all in a crimson light. The windows were coated in cascading red waterfalls as hell's sky finally broke loose. It caused the man to shudder as he entered the room. He didn't know exactly what to expect. The room was mostly normal, a messy office with bookshelves to either wall, with books and papers strewed about. However, in the middle of the room, a desk sat, with a large box-shaped computer on top of it. Every square inch of floor was covered with cables and wires that seemed to snake into oblivion. All of it connected to that almighty computer in the center. He looked around cautiously before gently stepping on the wires to get to the PC, the most advanced piece of technology humanity had to offer. Personal computers capable of running complex programs and being coded to fit any need or desire you could ever want. And most importantly, play a CD-ROM. He wiped the dust from its curved glass screen as if it were a precious ancient artifact. Then he went to power it on. He paused, noticing that the dust on the power button had recently been rubbed off. He narrowed his eyes before cautiously pressing it. The machine whirred to life and text scrawled over the screen, the monitor flickering, the scan lights phasing, and the hum of electricity. He waited patiently as it booted up for the first time in ages, or perhaps the second time in a short while, as he had begun to suspect. The PC had seemingly been set up to play even without the power that had long been cut off from the empty city. The man wondered how, but didn't question it. He had something more important to occupy himself with. He didn't have time to think. Finally, the computer had reached the home screen, and he checked to see if the disk was still inserted in the optical drive. The ejected tray indeed did hold some sort of disk. It was a CD-ROM. He just hoped it was the right one. The seconds seemed like hours as he reinserted the disk into the PC and waited for it to load, for its secrets to be revealed. The message began. It showed a man older than the person watching. He showed signs of age, but overall very much healthy and vibrant, with plenty of years ahead of him. This man wore a lab coat stretching to the floor. He wore a mustache, beard, and small round spectacles, giving him a mature look about him. Though the feature that stood out the most was the medical eye patch across his right eye. It was a sign of the disease, the beginning of the infection, and the only known way to temporarily halt the painful ailment. The only way to keep it from spreading or getting worse, to hide it from the light. To cover one's eyes to protect them, and if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable from thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. That is, to cut out another's eyes to save them. The man in the video then introduced himself as Dr. Iscariot. He went on saying that the message was for his son, Jason Iscariot, and him alone. As the short video was coming to its end, the doctor explained that the video was for Jason to come and find him. After the video ended, the screen instantly closed into a line in the center and faded out, accompanied by sparks and smoke from the computer, showing a small sign of its life burning out. Mild shock crossed the man's face. Then he let out a quiet sigh of annoyance. It was broken, and the disk drive had burnt out. The most likely cause was either its age or a power surge, caused by old wiring or even a thunderstrike. The downpour had shown no signs of slowing, so the man checked his watch. He weighed his options and decided to hold up in the bathroom for the night. He curled up in the tub and fell asleep, contemplating the one-time message. He mumbled the names Jason and Iscariot, contemplating them, as if tasting the words themselves on his tongue. Then finally closed his eyes, and entered the only peaceful place left in the world, the land of dreams. However, he had no dreams, because he had nothing left to dream about. The man woke up the next day to an utterly silent house, not a sound. The bloody rain had stopped, so he reset his 12-hour timer. An almost dusty, industrial-feeling light pervaded the area, almost more of a glow of technology than anything else. That was the only way to perceive one's surroundings. The sky was always dark with clouds. They blocked out the stars and choked the air. There was no way to tell the difference between night and day. That is, except to keep time, as the man had been doing since the rain had first come. He had been keeping time for 20 years. Though the rains were more recent than that. It was a habit ever since he had received the gift. The watch he had been gifted was the first digital watch he had ever seen. The face glowed its sickly green color. It was comforting, the man thought, to have something to count on. He heard the distant rumblings of what seemed to be a train. It was in the direction he was headed, but he proceeded cautiously anyway, hoping that all would turn out all right. Eventually, he came to the street that passed underneath the raised railroad. The telephone wires seemed to stretch across the horizon forever. The wind turbines blinked in the distance rhythmically. The rumbling had grown deafening now, and the crossing guard had come down to guard non-existent people in cars from driving on the tracks. He realized that he was too late as he ran for cover off the side of the road, trying to get to the buildings. All sounds seemed to disappear just as the train began to pass above the road. A light appeared on the other side of the tunnel, turning the man into a silhouette. A giant mechanized beast burst through the concrete of the railway bridge, derailing the train. The behemoth's body propelled itself forward across the road. The man managed to get off the road just as an explosion of sound hit him from behind. The windows shattering, wood splintering, drywall insulation, and shingle shrapnel flying through the air, all culminating in and throughout the obliteration of several buildings. The train seemingly never running low on momentum. Eventually, after leveling several buildings, the severely demolished train skidded to a stop. The man, now somewhat safe, watched the carnage from the window of an abandoned video rental store. The massive creature pulled itself through the wreckage, using its long body to propel itself, not unlike an inchworm. However, this inchworm had light beams instead of eyes, staring straight ahead, and what looked like metal instead of flesh. It paid no heed to the damage done. After it had long moved on, the man finally crawled out of the building that was his refuge. The man surveyed the damage. The road, both the lower that the beast had traveled and the upper for trains, had been obliterated. The man let out an irritated huff. He would have to find another route altogether, some other way to his new destination. But as he stood there contemplating, he heard the distant rumbling once more. The thought of thunder, the emissary of the red rain, was instantly upon him. Nothing brought any comfort, because nothing was much better nor much worse. The only thing driving him forward was his goal. It was the only thing he had left in this blood-colored world. That and his name.